This week, watching the inauguration, I wondered, did we elect a king? Before America's first inauguration, John Adams suggested George Washington be called His Most Benign Highness. Fortunately, Congress insisted on a more modest title. But some people cheering the president this week acted like he will make everything better.
More jobs.
Climate change.
What do you think the next 4 years are going to be like?
Definitely awesome. I think it's going to get better.
What will President Obama do about immigration?
This is not the American dream. This is an American nightmare.
About marijuana?
A celebratory smokeout now that pot is legal.
I expect the federal government to come in and to sue.
About spending?
Obama Part 2. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Who was that guy? Anyway, this Monday, our nation's capital looked like a monarchy looks when a new king is crowned. Thousands applaud and cheer. Many act like subjects worshiping nobility. At a time when America faces unsustainable debt, economic troubles, why all the pomp? Watching, I wondered, should our capital be called Imperial Washington? But maybe I go too far. Senator John Barrasso attended the inauguration. He joins us now from Washington. So my Imperial Washington seems to be a minority opinion. Am I being unfair?
Well, I've been to every inauguration since I was 8, and my dad took me to John Kennedy's inauguration, so I've been to quite a few. This inauguration, I tell you, John, I'm less concerned about what happens one day than I'm concerned about what this president plans to do for the next 4 years as an imperial president, with rules and regulations and red tape and the czars, the recess appointments, rather than actually realizing this is one of 3 branches of government. I think that he believes he's the king.
Well, you talked about your father bringing you to these inaugurations, which is sort of unusual, and you were not in politics. You had a real job. You were a doctor. And now that you're in the Senate, is there an imperial attitude of we know best and we're going to fix it all?
Well, I think the imperial attitude is coming out of the Obama White House. And now you just saw this last week. He came out with 23 executive orders related to guns and issues there. So I think we're going to continue to see this president overreach and do things that he wasn't able to do legislatively.
This idea of executive orders does seem extraordinary. And Paul Begala, when he was working for President Clinton, said, wow, stroke of a pen, law of the land, kind of cool.
And this is a president that I think has gone way beyond that in terms of the number of regulations that have come out under this administration, and what are called significant regulations, which have an impact of over $100 million. Those are the things that are hurting our economy, making it harder to get people back to work and making it harder for hardworking taxpayers.
Though to be fair to President Obama, he's not the first to do this by any means. Even George Washington did this. Teddy Roosevelt did many more. Nixon's wage and price controls, executive order. JFK created the Peace Corps with an executive order. There's precedent.
Well, there is, but if you kind of go back to the founding fathers, the Federalist Papers, they said if men were angels, we wouldn't need laws. But that's why they set up a checks and balance system of government, and the president doesn't appear to believe that that applies to him.
And I go back to our first president as I look at an inauguration. George Washington said that political parties are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men subvert the power of the people to usurp for themselves the reins of government for unjust dominion. All right, so you leave medical profession, come to Washington. You see that?
Well, I want to work to improve the quality of life of American people. But what you have now seen is with that quote, and we've seen with the president's campaign team, they have now moved that to a nonprofit. They're going to take money from unions and from corporations. They will not say that they will report how much they get from each of those unions and corporations. And they're saying they're going to use it for the political purposes, not, John, to deal with jobs and the economy and debt and spending, which are the key issues of interest to the American people, but they're going to focus, they said, on guns and on immigration, those issues, and climate change, of all things. That's where they're going to direct the money and the power instead of dealing with the issues that are number one on the minds of the American people.
And if Congress won't vote to support it, your staff said you like the Weekly Standard cover. We don't need no stinking Congress.
That's that cover tells the story of the way that this imperial presidency is going to be run. And the president's disdain for Congress doesn't just apply to the Republican Party. I talked to colleagues in the Senate who are Democrats, chairmen of committees who have not heard from the president for extended periods of time. The president is seeming to divorce himself from the entire institution.
Well, why not? I have disdain for Congress. The public does. A lot of them are self-interested buffoons.
The Constitution was set up in a way that there are checks and balances. The president doesn't come and visit with the voters of Wyoming or in many other states around the country. And it is the opportunity of individual citizens to have their voices heard by their local elected representatives. The president should be paying attention to that rather than thinking it's his way or the highway and that he knows best. As the president, from his inaugural address, it seemed to me, was saying, I am the government and I'm here to help you.
Senator Barrasso, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, John.
And thanks for attending the inaugural so I don't have to. And Kennedy, I thank you too, because you went there and interviewed people. What was that like?
It was cold and crowded and boring.
And these people waited 6 hours sometimes in the cold to hear this man they love so much.
Oh, yeah. No, it's an entire group of people that can appropriately be called Obama zombies. But they weren't looking for brains. They were looking for their hero to worship.
Watching your interviews, I did get the sense that there are still people who think a president, and this president especially, is magic. A politician can solve everything.
I feel good that we've reelected Obama. Climate change. I mean, we left Chicago. There hasn't been any snow this winter. This is important.
What do you think the next 4 years are going to be like?
Definitely awesome. I think it's going to get better, for sure.
It'll get better.
How so?
More jobs.
You think?
I think so.
All right, and what will drive the improving economy?
You're asking too many hard questions on a cold day.
Do you think he's going to run for a third term?
I hope so.
If he could,
I will vote.
he would. If he could, he would.
3 terms.
Yeah. The darn 22nd Amendment to the Constitution. That's the only thing that's going to hold him back. But he can change that.
And were people suspicious of you? Did they ask, where are you from?
Well, we're always a little aloof when people say, when an interview especially doesn't go well, they say, where are you from? And we say, Stossel. And 80% of people, it shuts them up and they walk away. Grumble, grumble. And then they go, where does that air? Fox. Oh, Fox. Oh. And then they threaten lawsuits and union thuggery.
But we want to hear their ideas. The president's inauguration speech, traditionally they've been more ceremonial, friendly, let's all get together kind of speeches. But this one was overtly political. Big government is coming, and the heck with the absolutists who resist. And the crowd liked that.
Now that he's got the mandate, having been elected for a second term, I think that's probably, he has kind of the latitude to be able to make some of those bolder moves.
I think he has more freedom to show his true colors.
His true colors. So that frightens me. What's the vibe you got?
The vibe I got was that he's going to use this newfound freedom, this mandate. And by the way, if I had played a drinking game and taken a shot every time someone used the word mandate, I would have had alcohol poisoning by noon. His true colors are going to allow him to use his freedom to squash our personal freedoms. Just wait and see.
And again, you interviewed people who seemed to be repeating talking points?
Yeah. No, it was as though the Democratic Party had issued everyone the same statements, the same lines about climate change and mandates and health care. I didn't see any of the pamphlets, and maybe it was some sort of chip that was activated as soon as you walked through security, but it was incredible. No one there was able to think their own thoughts or articulate something original, and that's why it was boring.
Well, I'm glad I wasn't there. Since he plans to stop climate change and provide more health insurance and yet make no cuts to Medicare or Social Security or much of anything, where's the money going to come from? The crowd didn't see a problem with that.
He's a big spending president. How does he curtail that?
I would like to differ with that. He's not a spending president. He's not the spending president because Bush spent so much money and nobody said anything.
He is increasing.
No, he's
across the board.
No, I don't think so.
Have you looked at
I would like to differ with you on that.
You can like to differ, but it's actually not true.
It is true. When you look at how much, President Bush spent, it's more than what Obama spent.
It took 8 years to get the United States where it is now, so I think it's going to take another 8 years to get it back.
I think we can do it if we stop spending a lot of money on wars.
Taxing people that have a lot of money is not unfair. We don't need people to be as rich as they really are.
And for the record, Bush did spend an astounding $3 trillion per year, average over 8 years, but Obama spent $3.8 trillion per year so far, and that's adjusted for inflation. So Obama spent 25% more. But they don't believe there. They think it's all Bush. It's all Bush's fault.
No, it's a special kind of Kool-Aid. It's half hero worship mixed with mass delusion, and they're all drinking it. So it was very entertaining, and people managed to stay warm. They couldn't answer one basic question: how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? That's also something they can't answer in Greece, and that's where we're headed. Look at the riots and the protests and the killing and the threats that are happening in that country.
Well, I agree. This is the scariest part, the debt, and I fear, and I assume we will become Greece. I hoped we would learn from what happened in Greece. But as of this week, I no longer do, because the reaction of people in Greece is not to say, gee, we messed up, we spent too much. It's to be angry about the politicians who want to cut back a bit. And how do they take it out? They bomb the homes of TV commentators who support some cuts.
Yes, the guy in the devil box. Get rid of him. Okay, but I have to tell you.
So that's the model for us?
That, unfortunately, that's the road we're headed down. And especially, I live in California, and we see it coming even faster. I mean, we're on the opposite coast. We shouldn't be that close to Greece, but somehow we are.
Well, you're another model for failure. We thank you.
And thank you very much. I mean, at least you said that I was a model, and I take that as a compliment, John. But here's what we need to do. You should send me to Greece. I studied in Greece. I actually love Greece, and I understand the Greek people. And I will go there, I will show the problems, I will come up with potential solutions, and we will solve everything together.
All right, well, we'll have to talk about that. Thank you, Kennedy. Later in the show, the president's own words.
America has a debt problem.
Okay, that's not the actual president, but those are Barack Obama's words once he believed that. But next, how states may push back against Imperial Washington. Americans, when polled, say, we don't trust politicians. But then they demand that politicians fix every problem. That's how we got Obamacare, a federal education department, a drug war. The voter says, do something. And it's a natural instinct. It's why I wrote, no, they can't. Politicians promise to solve problems, but they can't. Often we can without government. So, as we begin, what can we do if we disagree with President Obama's big government vision? Mark Meckler and Starlee Rhodes have some ideas. Meckler heads a group called Citizens for Self-Governance. Rhodes is vice president of the conservative libertarian Goldwater Institute. Both say we can return power to the states. So, what do you mean? Start with Obamacare.
The law said states should establish health insurance exchanges. If they don't want to, the federal government will do it for them. 25 states have said, go right ahead, federal government, enforce your policy on your own. We're not going to do it. You're going to have to implement your own law. And that's a great decision for the states because it protects businesses in their state from fines. It stops massive subsidies from being paid out to insurance companies. And it protects people from being tattle-told on to the IRS.
All right, but let's break this down because I don't really get it. First of all, I never got the exchange. The exchange is a place where you would go on the web and it would help you buy an insurance policy. E-insurance just does that at no cost to the taxpayer.
Right.
I don't know why it has to be such a big deal or cost so much. So if these 25 states say, no, we won't set them up, I assume the feds will say, all right, use ours.
Well, that is what's going to happen. The federal government will end up doing an exchange in each state. But the thing that's great about that policy change, having the federal government do it versus the states, is that, like I was saying, taxpayers are actually going to be protected from the very worst parts of the federal health care law if their state chose not to adopt an exchange. So we think it's a great idea.
Because the federal government under the law can't fine you if you, the $2,000 or whatever it is, if you don't join up.
That's right.
That has to be a state doing it?
In the federal law, when it was written, Congress did not give the federal government the authority to assess the penalties on businesses for noncompliance. It also did not give the federal government the authority to subsidize private insurance companies. So without subsidies to insurance companies to take people that they wouldn't normally take, and without fines on businesses who refuse to comply with the law, where is the law? It's nowhere.
And Mark, your group wants to go farther.
We've proposed something called the Healthcare Compact. It's an agreement between 2 or more states. We have 7 states that have now passed it.
That means their legislatures have voted
Legislatures voted for it, and the governor signed it into law. And ultimately, that will be presented to Congress. And if approved by Congress, it gives those states total authority for health care in their states, including makes all the money come back from the federal governments to the states. So this is a way for states to say, we can do a better job. We're closer to the people. And we think that's a good approach across the board, not just in health care.
Right now, the states have almost no flexibility. They have to cover this and this and this, whatever Obamacare dictates.
Right. And so the Healthcare Compact, the beauty of it, it's neither left nor right. It's free market. If states want to have a total left approach to healthcare, they can have a single payer system. They can opt into the federal government, or they can do like a state like Texas would probably do, is have a very open free market system. We get the 50-state laboratory. We find out what really works.
Let's move on to other topics where the federal government has taken over. The Department of Education.
Department of Education, historically, a total waste. Literally hundreds of billions of dollars spent, no improvement in test scores, federally mandated standards that are doing nothing for our children.
They spend $100 billion a year.
$100 billion a year for no results. Imagine any company in the world doing that. They wouldn't be in business, yet we as Americans have allowed that to continue far too long. It's time to drive that back to the parents. It should be up to the parents. They're the stakeholders in the system.
But states haven't done a great job.
Some states are doing really terrific jobs, though, and one of the things that we're seeing right now across the country, as Mark was saying, the federal government is asking states to homogenize education. Basically, they want every school to be teaching the exact same thing at the exact same time, doing it exactly the same way. And in places like Arizona, we're seeing the state go in the completely opposite direction, where parents are being given the freedom through a new program called Education Savings Accounts to hand pick the exact courses and learning enrichment opportunities that are going to be great for their individual children.
Third topic, marijuana. About a dozen states allow medical marijuana. 2 states, Colorado and Washington State, outright legalization. But the feds keep running raids. President Obama, though he admits he smoked and got high, that was the point, as he said, now he's locking people up for doing what he did.
And it's outrageous. I mean, he thinks that's funny that he got away with it, and it's ruining other people's lives. The federal government should have never been involved in this area.
Wait, so what's ruining other people's lives?
The fact they're getting locked up, they're getting thrown in jail.
Not the marijuana.
They're being prosecuted for the things that he did. He thinks that's funny, and he's in charge of making sure those prosecutions go forward. The reality is the federal government should have no involvement in this. At best, it should be at the state level. Let the states who represent the people best make those decisions on their own.
The president did also say recently that he has, quote, bigger fish to fry than people smoking a joint in Colorado. So we'll see how much energy the federal government puts into the
But it's
policy.
not a good way to govern that you might be arrested for anything and you just hope they don't have the energy to get to your thing.
You know what I would argue it is for those in power, that's the perfect way to govern. What they want is they want to create a nation of criminals. There's uncertainty about who will be prosecuted. That gives the government the ultimate power. They do it not only with marijuana and drug policy, but in all areas of the law. We have so much over-criminalization, it's creating problems for all of us.
All right, let's talk about guns. Since the Connecticut school shooting, there's this new drive for federal gun control. At the inauguration, Kennedy found people very enthusiastic about that.
Guns need to go away.
What about the First Amendment? Should we do away with that? Get rid of that Piers Morgan?
Amendment should not be gone away with, no.
We can't pick and choose.
Yes, we can pick and choose.
Fourth Amendment, done.
No,
Seventh, out of here.
No, the fourth stays. That's search and seizure. I like the fourth, and I like fifth.
All right, well, I like them all.
Yeah, well, I don't like the second, so the second can go away.
It's not a buffet, though.
Guns can go away, okay?
So this is an educated woman. She knew what the Fourth Amendment was, and yet she'll throw out the second.
Yeah, these are people with a fundamental misunderstanding of our Constitution, how our country works, the meaning of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was designed to protect us against government tyranny. That is somebody who is in support ultimately of government tyranny.
But she picks and chooses her tyrannies.
That's typical.
Finally, taxes. Last week we talked about the beauty of 50 states. You mentioned the laboratory of democracy. At least you can escape your state if they tax you to death.
You can. The problem we have is the federal tax continues to get more and more
onerous. You're
still
smothered by that.
Right, and frankly, we should start by just repealing the federal income tax. I mean, that's something we really need to start having a serious discussion about. You hear that all over the country. So, and it's not, John, it's not because...
We don't hear it all over the country. You hear it in my audience. If you heard it all over the country, it would be gone. It's not gone. People like federal rules.
One of the things we know, states without an income tax do so much better economically. They have higher rates of entrepreneurship. They do better at reducing their poverty rates. They have higher job growth. They have higher personal income growth. So in the states where we're seeing states experiment right now without having a state income tax, they have weathered the recession so much better. They are doing better. Last week, 4 new governors said they are going to make a push to eliminate their state income tax. I think we're going to see a lot more states compete against each other to attract businesses and economic development in that way.
Thank you, Starlee. Mark. Coming up on Obama Part 2, the fight over immigration and illegal immigration, and the president's own words come back to haunt him.
Our federal debt has increased from $3.5 trillion to $8.6 trillion. And yes, I said trillion with a T.
Illegals sneak into America. They take our jobs, commit crimes, go on welfare. No, most illegals are honest, hardworking, and immigrants built America. That, in a nutshell, is the debate about immigration. Last year, President Obama issued an executive order that would allow children whose parents brought them here illegally to work for 2 years without fear of deportation. Now, I would think immigrant groups would like that, but Daniel Garza, who heads the Libre Initiative, an immigrant advocacy group based in D.C., says it was done mostly to score political points, and it's not helpful?
No, it's not helpful. That's exactly what it was, and actually he did score the political points, and he scored.
Why isn't it helpful? He's legalizing some workers, some...
It is, but it was a temporary Band-Aid to what should have been a permanent solution. We had Republicans on the Hill who were already working towards getting something permanent, and what he did was just sort of derail that.
But you say some Republicans have a better plan? What?
Well, I don't know if it's a better plan, but what we have is, on one side, President Barack Obama wants a big, massive bill, one of those that you can't wrap your arms around, and is unpalatable to the Republican side, who wants it in bite-sized chunks. Let's break it down. How do we address the issue of those who are here currently unauthorized, the children of those who are unauthorized, and then also those who want to come into the country, and then border security? So it's 4 parts.
Marco Rubio's bill says those who have no criminal record come forward to be fingerprinted, pay back taxes, certain fines, after a waiting period, can apply for citizenship.
I don't know if he says to apply for citizenship. I think what he's talking about is adjustment of status to legality. So what we do is decriminalize the activity where business folks are responding to market forces by hiring who they need to hire to make profit. Unfortunately, what we have is a criminal culture that is sort of a seedy underground to America at this point that needs to be addressed.
Like your father?
My father came when he was young on the shoulders of his uncle, crossed the river illegally. When he was 12, he became a permanent resident. And thank God my father did that, took that decision to come to America.
All right, I'm going to push back what the critics say. If you have a bill like these that legalize people, this rewards illegality. It tells people, go ahead, break the law, we'll forgive you.
You have to understand that these folks come from rural areas in countries in Latin America where they do things extra legal, where the rule of law is not important. So when they come here, they break the law, but they break the law to work. Americans like to break the law not to work.
It's going to lower the wage of American workers, burdens the welfare system. They go on welfare, they game the system.
Which actually makes the case for immigration reform. What we need to do is to set a condition where folks who do apply are going to be self-reliant, are not going to be a burden to the state, and they have to prove that. And after maybe so many years, they can then prove themselves and then apply for permanency. Permanencia, they call it in Spanish. And that's important for Hispanic families and the cohesiveness of these families to stay together.
And finally, you wrote an article for Fox News Latino titled, "People Are Not Illegal." But these people, 12 million, are illegal. I use the phrase illegals. You object to that.
I strongly object to that, John. These folks are human beings. They're fathers, they're mothers, they're grandparents who are seeking opportunity. People are not illegal. What they do is illegal. And if you brand them as illegal, what you do is, in a sense, I think what you're trying to do is dehumanize them. Like, it makes it maybe better to not think of their dreams and aspirations as equal to yours. And they're fellow human beings who are seeking opportunity. And so to use illegal, the term, is not helpful to the dialogue and is demeaning to the folks.
Thank you, Daniel Garza of the Libre Initiative, a group that believes in free markets.
Absolutely, economic freedom.
Coming up later, the real Barack Obama?
If Washington were serious, we would see an effort to reduce our debt by returning to responsible fiscal policies.
Barack Obama's actual words. Also, how I will now judge whether a politician is likely to do the right thing.
We must make the hard choices to reduce the cost of health care and the size of our deficit.
Yes, we must make hard choices to reduce the deficit. But although the president said that, he doesn't propose hard choices. He doesn't cut much of anything. And in his long inaugural address Monday, he mentioned debt once. He basically dismissed it the next sentence, saying, "We reject the belief that America must choose between caring for the elderly and investing in the next generation. Apparently no choices need be made. The government's Santa Claus." But we can't afford Santa Claus. I'm grateful to Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform. He got many politicians to pledge not to raise taxes. Good. Taxes are high enough. And it was thought that the tax limits would starve the beast, the beast being Washington, and beast is a good term for Washington, but starving the beast hasn't worked. Even tax-cutting politicians just keep spending. And as Milton Friedman taught me, spending is a far more accurate gauge of government's burden. Every dollar government spends is a dollar taxed away from someone. If it's borrowed, it sets the stage for higher taxes later. If government prints more dollars to fund spending, our purchasing power falls. It's all a tax on our future. Instead of politicians pledging not to raise taxes, what we really need are politicians pledging not to raise spending. And now, finally, we've got that, thanks to Jonathan Bidlack of the Coalition to Reduce Spending, which came up with this Reject the Debt pledge. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, the pledge basically asks candidates to commit to three things. One, that they'll only vote for balanced budgets. Two, that they won't vote for any new spending that isn't offset elsewhere in the budget. And three, that they won't vote to increase borrowing or the debt ceiling.
And anybody sign it?
We did. We had 24 candidates who signed. Two who
you just started this year?
We did, this election cycle. And so the two who were elected were Senator Cruz from Texas and Doug Collins, a representative from Georgia.
But that means most of them lost.
True. Well, I mean, obviously this is not something that's easy to sign, right? It's very easy to say you're not going to raise taxes. It's another thing to say that you're not going to vote to increase borrowing or continue spending.
I'll sign it, though I don't count here because I'm not a politician. But I get the part that says, therefore, I pledge I will not vote to authorize or fund new programs without offsetting cuts in others. But this one, I will not vote for any budget that's not balanced. That seems unrealistic because you don't need to balance if you just slow the growth of government in 10 years, you could get us out of trouble. But balanced budget's not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, the budget is a blueprint, right? So the budget is not the be-all, end-all. I mean, the big problem is that we haven't even passed the budget or the Senate hasn't passed the budget in the last 3.5 years. So to be honest, that plank of the pledge is in the current political environment less relevant than the other two.
And no incumbents have signed the pledge.
That's correct.
Though Ted Cruz is now an incumbent, so I think
that's right. And Ted Cruz, for all we know, could end up being a great fiscal conservative senator. He could end up being a completely unfiscal conservative senator. But at least now we have him on the record to the point where if he ends up voting for unbalanced budget, if he votes for new spending programs, voters and the press and activists can actually hold him accountable.
A Fox News poll asked people, government spending is out of control or managed carefully. In 2009, 62% said out of control, but by this year, 83%. So if people think that, why is it so hard to cut?
Well, I think part of it is that people don't have a mechanism. They don't know what they can do to actually solve the problem, right? If you ask the studio audience here, maybe this audience isn't the most representative sample, but
no.
If you went to a coffee shop around the corner and you said that,
well, they're not representative either. This
is true. This is true. If you went to a coffee shop in some other place and you asked, if you said, you're making $5,000 a month, but you're spending $10,000, what do you need to do? The average person's not going to say, well, I need to go to my boss and ask for a $5,000 raise. They're not going to say, oh, I need to cut out my Starbucks. They're going to say, I need to fundamentally reassess what I'm spending my money on. So people get that in their personal lives, but they don't always make the connection to the political sphere, and part of that reason is because they don't have a mechanism to hold people in the political sphere accountable when they don't act in the way that they would in their own personal lives. And that's why I think the pledge is important.
And the other reason maybe the poll misleads is that everybody says, yeah, let's cut spending.
Right.
But when you get to the specifics, should it be defense? Should it be Medicare? Should we kill the drug war? Then people, no, you can't. Except these people.
But you know what? It's surprising. Rasmussen did a poll last month that showed that 48% of Americans believe that everything in the budget should be on the table as a means of balancing the budget. So that's the highest that poll has ever shown. It was something like a 4 or 5% increase from the last time Rasmussen asked the question. So when you talk about it in the context of the debt, people start to get that we have a spending problem.
Thank you, Jonathan Bidlack. Hope lots of people sign this thing. Next, the audience gets to ask the questions, and then Senator Barack Obama, politician I long for.
It took 42 presidents, 224 years, to run up only $1 trillion worth of foreign-held debt.
We're back with your questions for my guests. Mark Meckler, who founded the biggest Tea Party group, the Goldwater Institute's Starlee Rhodes. Daniel Garza, who wants immigrants made legal. And Jonathan Bidlack, who wants politicians to pledge not to increase spending. So first from my Facebook page, Susan Cross says about executive orders. What are the limits? And who made the most during their presidency? So what is an executive order and what are the limits?
Executive orders are something that's used by presidents supposedly to allow them to execute the law or their other duties. They're not actually specified in the Constitution, and there are no specified limits. And presidents have used them in a variety of ways, but they seem to get more and more expansive. And frankly, they're a way to create an imperial presidency. There really are no limits on them.
And the worst, I happen to know this was not Barack Obama or even FDR. It was Teddy Roosevelt, who issued 1,000 executive orders, including one that tried to change the language. He said words should be spelled phonetically. Kissed should be K-I-S-T, and enough, E-N-U-F. And only because Congress, with a 2/3 vote, voted against that, did that not happen. So who has a question here?
My question is, when do you think the government will get serious about cutting the debt? What will it take, basically?
Riots, chaos in the street, massive inflation.
I think it's going to take a change in incentives. The problem is that for elected officials right now, if you think about would they want to cut spending or would they want to increase spending, all of their incentives are on the side of increasing spending. They have lobbying groups that are pushing for various pieces of spending. So there needs to be something on the other side, right?
And everybody who comes to Washington, they aren't saying cut spending. They're saying, oh, this group so much needs help and this program is so good. 99% of the testimony they hear is for more spending.
Right, and I think it's time for an advocacy organization on the other side of that equation to show that there's actually a movement of people out there who care about this issue enough to vote on it.
We took a look a couple of years ago at state capitals as well, because of course states all across the country are facing the very same problems with spending. And in most state capitals, lobbyists that are paid for by government funds, taxpayer-funded lobbyists, outnumber private sector lobbyists 10-1. So when you think about the dynamic that creates for state lawmakers too, when everybody that's coming to lobby them is government-funded.
What is a government-paid lobbyist? What does that mean?
So somebody who's paid to lobby for a city, or they're the county lobbyist, or they lobby for the state health care program, they lobby for the state environmental office, they lobby for the state universities,
more money for our cause,
for state schools. Yeah.
And John, these are folks that are politically connected as well. So we have cronyism that is at play here. So if you're affluent and connected, you're going to get part of the pie.
One more, yeah.
Disregarding the morality or ethics of a law, in this case immigration, it is the law. So to what extent is it morally acceptable to break the law?
It is not acceptable, but again, because it's being broken so much, and property and lives are not being lost here. What you have is you've criminalized the relationship between the private sector and an individual. So why not legalize that relationship and give us that competitive advantage and improve the marketplace? So we don't have these market deficiencies if you have a loss between labor and capital.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Coming up, why I wish President Obama was more like he used to be. And you'll be amazed at what he once said. Did you watch the inaugural ceremony this week? Well, let me ask you, how many of you watched the inauguration? Minority of you. Well, we watched so you don't have to. I thought President Obama started out okay.
The patriots of 1776 did not fight to replace the tyranny of a king with the privileges of a few.
Yes. America doesn't need the tyranny of a king or the tyranny of the privileged few. But then the president went on to say he and a privileged few should force the rest of us to do a zillion things.
Together, together, together.
He kept saying the word together.
We must do these things together.
But what together means to big government folks is that they have a vision, and all of us together must go deeper into debt to pay for their vision, even if we disagree. Well, we can afford this, apparently, as the president told John Boehner last month, because America does not have a spending problem. But of course, we do have a spending problem and a debt problem. I prefer Senator Barack Obama, the man who said this.
I'm here today to talk about America's debt problem. The fact that we are here to debate raising America's debt limit is a sign of leadership failure and our government's reckless fiscal policies.
Right, raising the debt limit is a failure. Okay, it was in 2006 when he was not yet president when he said that, but then he still cared about the debt. We can't find the actual video of him saying that on the Senate floor, but here are his words. We took the text from the congressional record.
Over the past 5 years, our federal debt has increased from $3.5 trillion to $8.6 trillion. And yes, I said trillion with a T.
Again, his words. He was right then to worry about the debt.
That's money we have borrowed from the Social Security Trust Fund, borrowed from China and Japan, and borrowed from American taxpayers. This rising debt is a hidden domestic enemy, robbing our cities and our states of critical investments in infrastructure, robbing our families and our children, and robbing our seniors of the retirement and health security they've counted on for all these years.
Exactly. Our national debt is a hidden domestic enemy. And I was glad to discover that in 2006, the future president was upset about the interest on our debt.
Every dollar we pay in interest, that's a dollar that's not going to investments in America's priorities. If Washington were serious, we would see an effort to reduce our debt by returning to responsible fiscal policies.
Yes, we would, if Washington were serious. The real President Obama looks serious, but he isn't. He ignores what he was right to be upset about just 7 years ago. The congressional record shows that Senator Obama said this about the Bush administration. It took 42 presidents 224 years to run up only $1 trillion of foreign-held debt. This administration did more than that in just 5 years. And he was right. The Bush administration did that. But now Obama's administration has done much worse. They've run up another $6 trillion in debt. How is that possible when just a few years ago, Barack Obama believed this?
America has a debt problem. I therefore intend to oppose the effort to increase America's debt limit.
Yet this year, President Obama demanded Congress raise the debt limit without conditions. I want the old Barack Obama back. He made sense. The new guy, he scares the heck out of me. I fear he's going to bankrupt my country. And that's our show. I'm John Stossel. We'll be back next week.